This is probably going to be a long listen, so please bear with me as this story has a lot of details. The reason I wanted to share my experience is because I know a lot of people have at one time or another in their lives dealt with someone who was either super creepy or that person began to stalk them. So here it goes. Here is a short story of how this all began. When I was about 16, my mother told me a friend of hers needed a babysitter, and I was more than willing to take the job because I could always use the extra cash. I have a very close relationship with my mother, so I had complete trust in this friend of hers, since my mother doesn't trust just anyone. So I began to babysit her 10-year-old and 7-year-old daughters. The oldest had a major attitude, but after I became their regular sitter, she wasn't as difficult to deal with. If you're curious as to why I'm sharing this, it's a vital detail to the story. Let's fast forward several years. I'm about 19 years old now. I know this because I had graduated high school the year before. This was a major deal in my life, so it's all very vivid in my mind. I hadn't babysit for this family for about 2 years by now. I was pretty busy with going to college, working my part-time job, and spending spare time with family and close friends. One day, my mother approaches me and asks if I would be willing to befriend a girl that her parents felt needed socialization. She gave me a few details before I decided on what to do. She told me that the girl that she wanted me to befriend was one of the girls that I used to babysit. I asked her who she was referring to because I babysat for several families when I was a full-time sitter. She told me who it was. I was slightly hesitant because of the attitude she had when I first met her, but I was always open to helping other people in any way that I could. I began to get together with her every once in a while. I would invite her to small gatherings with some of my other friends, but only if there were other young ones with us, like their little sisters or something. I was always in groups of people of various ages, usually around the age of 13 and over, and always with both boys and girls. My older friends and I were sort of the big sisters of the group, so that's why we were always happy to have those type of gatherings. She slowly opened up to me. She began to share with me that she was dealing with depression and often felt that she was unloved by her family and friends. She also told me that she had contemplated suicide and was cutting herself. Well, the reason I took to her more than the other younger ones is because I had dealt with those same exact thoughts and feelings when I was around her age. So I wanted to do my best to give her a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. I would give her some advice, anything that I thought would benefit her. Once she felt she could trust me, I tried to broaden her horizon, but things would take a strange and eventually sinister turn. Now, when I would try to invite her to our usual get-together or social events, she seemed very standoffish. I was a little surprised, but not too much, because I knew how difficult things were for her, and it did take her some time to warm up to the other people. And eventually, she began to try and drag me along with her when she had one of her "I don't want to be here" attitudes. For example, we would go to the house of another friend of mine. There would be maybe 6 or 8 of us in total, and we would watch movies or do something else. This was before the days of social media and the everyone has a cell phone era. She seemed to want to leave, but as soon as we got to go to wherever it was that we were, she wanted to leave. She would pull me aside and say, "I don't want to be here, let's go." Well, I at first was kind and would tell her, "Come on, let's just stay for a little while, and if you still don't want to stay, we'll leave." I soon learned that she didn't want to stay, even if we all were having a great time. Eventually, she kept pulling me aside whenever we were in a group settings, so I just eventually stopped inviting her altogether because all she wanted to do was leave, no matter what the circumstances were. I mention this because it's another vital part of the story. I would just spend time with her once in a while, just her and I. She began to call me on a daily basis. It started with 2 to 3 times a day, and eventually got up to 7 or 10 times every single day. As I said before, this time in my life I was always extremely busy, so I wasn't always home. I had my own telephone landline, because I was able to pay for it myself. I had an answering machine, not voicemail because I was too cheap to pay for a feature that I didn't need. Anyway, I would have to change the tapes way too often because of how much she would call me and leave message after message. She would leave messages like, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering my phone calls? Who are you with?" That was just a little too weird for me, and even when I told her that I wasn't always home until late in the evenings or night time, and all she had to do was leave one message. As soon as I was home, I'd return all the messages that I had for the day. That didn't deter her from continuing to do this every day. I began to get really annoyed, but stupid me didn't listen to my gut instincts. I kept telling myself, she just needs a friend, it's not her fault. Boy, would I soon learn that was just not the case. Eventually I kind of drifted away from her for a bit, not intentionally, just because things in life seemed to speed up, and I was even busier than before. I would have very few times that I could get together with a friend or two, possibly going out to eat, shopping at a mall, or maybe seeing a movie. Out of nowhere, she began showing up wherever I was, and no, I didn't tell her where I was going or who I was with. Like I said, I had pretty much drifted away from spending time with her. We lived in a pretty big suburb, so it's not like it would have been easy for her to know where to find me. I began to get really creeped out because I thought it was way too coincidental that she was everywhere that I was and when I would be doing anything recreational. She even found out where I worked and what college I was going to, something that I never told her. She was obviously not college age, so why was she at my college campus with her mother? She wasn't even in high school yet. This is not even the creepiest part. Yes, there's more to this story. When I was on break from college, I had the time to spend with my family and close friends. I did get together with her a couple of times, still not listening to the creep meter I had going off. I was stupid. Well, things took an even more weird and unexplainable turn. She would ask to spend the night, and I didn't really do sleepovers anymore since I was of age, and pretty much leading my own life. But she was still a young one, so I would invite her once in a while to stay over. Somehow, I have no memory of how this happened, but she wouldn't leave. It's like she slept over one night and then just never left. Trust me, there was definitely not an open invitation for her to stay long term. I had told her that she couldn't stay with me because she had her own family, and so did I. She got very angry with me, and for several days refused to leave. Thankfully, I was still living at home, and my mum had to step in and pretty much tell her bluntly to get out. She had a little temper tantrum that night, but she did end up leaving. By this time, I had been fed up with her irrational and erratic behavior. I was avoiding her like the plague. I didn't call her back. If she was somewhere I was, I would duck into hiding, so to speak, and try to lose her in the crowd. That didn't stop her from increasing her strange behavior. Her family even did some things that I feel sort of helped her to stalk me more. Now, this is not something that I'm making up, this actually happened to me. She moved to a street around the corner from where I live. Now that's not the scary part. Her and her family moved into a house which, from her living room window, you could see directly into our backyard, and from there you could see the window to my bedroom. Yes, that happened. I only know this because I found out where she had moved, and my mum was still friends with her mother, so I remember going over there once she wasn't home, and when I looked out of their living room window, I could see our house, my bedroom window from our backyard. We had a chain link fence, so you could see everything. I got the chills when I saw that. When we got home, I informed my mum, who was so busy socializing that she didn't even notice. That's when my mother tried to talk to her mum and tell her about the situation. Her parents both just ignored my mum's warning. My mum tried to ask them to tell her to back off. Well, that didn't happen. Things just escalated from there. Her mum even tried to convince me to stay friends with her and wanted to pretty much pawn her daughter off to me. I don't even remember what she said to try and convince me. I just remember saying to myself, "Okay, lady, you're just as nuts as your daughter." It wasn't long before the most sinister and disturbing part happened. This was the last straw. I was home alone one day. She was still living in the Stalker house, so this had to be the only way that she knew I was the only one home. I wasn't talking to her. I had even changed my phone number and told my friends to absolutely not give it to her, on which they respected and happily obliged. Anyway, as I said, I was home alone. It was maybe about 10 AM, and I was just getting up to take a shower and get ready to start my day. As soon as I get out of the shower, I hear the doorbell ring. I think nothing of it and go to answer the door. I always looked through the peephole before I answered the door, something I still do to this day. I see several police officers standing there. I got a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, thinking something had happened to one of my family members. I answered the door and they asked me, "Are you Sarah?" Sarah is the reference to my stalker's name. I'm using that to protect my identity, but it's not her real name. I answered, "No, she doesn't live here." The officer then asks, "Do you have any identification with you?" Which I answered, "Of course, but it's in the back of the house. I have to go and get it." Now, mind you, I'm totally confused as to why they're at my door and why they're asking for my ID. The officer then proceeds to tell me that he has to come with me when I go into the back of the house. I just nodded in agreement, but still confused as to what was going on. So we got into my bedroom. I grab my ID and I show the officer who I am. He just says, "Okay, thank you. May we sit down for a moment and talk to you?" I, of course, agreed and motioned him back into the living room where the other officers had joined us. We sit down and they tell me that they had received an anonymous phone call. That there was a young lady that lived at my address by the name of Sarah that was extremely suicidal and may have already taken her life. I just sat there for a moment in complete shock. I told them that she used to be a friend of mine, but that I hadn't talked to her in quite a while, but that she absolutely did not live here. They asked me if I had any contact information for where she was. Thankfully, I still had her info on hand. I then give them her contact information, telephone number and home address. They thanked me for my time and left. I thought that was the end of it. Not by a long shot. I apologize for the length, but this is all important for me to get out. After they leave, I called my mum immediately. She proceeded to tell me to come to her workplace until I had to go to my classes for the day. I hightailed it and drove to her office. Since she owned the business, it was no problem for me to stay there for a few hours. I stayed there until I had to go to class, and then went on with the rest of my day, although I was still shaken up a bit. The rest of this story is from a third-party perspective. All of my close friends knew about the situation by this time because her behavior was too psychotic for me, and I was going to do whatever I needed to do, so I would be safe. I believe a few friends of mine and myself were at a coffee shop, one of the internet cafes from back in the day, and we were talking when another mutual friend walks in and comes right up to us, looks at me and says, "I have to tell you something." I was like, "Okay, shoot." Apparently, a few days before, they had ran into Sarah, my stalker, and they said she looked eerily exactly like me. My jaw dropped and I asked, "Wait, what? What do you mean?" We, myself and Sarah, in no way looked similar, in no way, shape or form. I mean, it wasn't like you would confuse one of us for the other. Well, she had apparently begun to dress very much like me, dyed and styled her hair like mine, wore the same kind of bracelets I would wear, and just looked exactly like me. I was shocked to my very core. I had been on the phone with a couple of friends of mine. I had the three-way calling feature where you could call two people at once and all talk to one another. One of the other friends on the line had informed me what they had heard about why the suicidal report incident occurred. Mind you, this is few months after the fact. She had heard from another reliable and trustworthy friend of ours that the reason there was that call was because Sarah called anonymously, saying that a young lady by that name lived at my home and was suicidal. That's not the craziest part. The reason she did it is because she wanted the police to think that I was her. She gave the police my physical description, and this was before she started looking like me, so they would take me away to a psychiatric ward. Therefore, she could take over my life. How crazy could she be? I don't know how she thought that my family and friends would allow her to do that, but this is how mental and unstable she was. Now, the timing for me was perfect. I only say that because I was getting ready to move away from that area and because I was starting a new job and life had taken me in that direction. My family was moving away with me for obvious reasons. So we in fact did move away. And it was the best thing to ever happen to me because she got worse and worse over time. She began to harass my close friends, trying to get my whereabouts, like my address, phone number, where I had moved away to. They didn't give her my information, since they know how psychotic she was. At one point, she even began to stalk the brother of one of my very close guy friends, just so she could try to intimidate him, to tell her where I was. He had to have his grandparents step in, because we wasn't of age yet. I have no idea what happened to that situation from there, since I had moved away by then, and the internet wasn't like it is today. Now, let's fast forward to 2012. Mind you, the stalking began around the year 2000. Obviously, since it's 2012, social media is a big thing right now, and of course I had a Facebook account. I didn't even think of my privacy because to me, all of that was long behind me, and I had eventually forgotten about Sarah. One day, I go to sign on and take a wild guess as to who tried to friend me on Facebook. My heart sank for a second. Then, the first thing that I did was delete her request and block her fast. Thinking I had taken care of the eerie online encounter, I was wrong yet again. She began to have her friends message me, asking me why I didn't accept her request. Why did I block her? Blah blah blah. I blocked each and every person that contacted me about her, until the messages just eventually stopped. Not quite to the end yet. Sorry everyone, I didn't really want it to be this long, but it's just how the story goes. The last run-in that I had with her online was when she tried to contact me through every single social media account that I had, Twitter, Instagram, etc. I blocked her, of course. She then proceeded to try and make fake accounts using my photo and name. I thought, okay, little Miss Crazy, I'll fix your fanny. As you must know, by now I am more assertive and didn't take any kind of craziness from anyone. I had all the fake accounts closed by reporting them to all the social media outlets, but not before getting as much information as I could, reporting her to the proper authorities. Thankfully, I had documented everything that happened in the past and kept it all sorted away. What can I say? I'm a pack rat. Once I get the reports out, the contact stopped. I also changed my name that I use on every social media account that I have. Instead of using my legal name, I use an alias instead. This is one thing that she didn't know about me. No one, except for my immediate family, knows this little fact. I also put everything on super private and have set some super high security measures. Now, one last fast forward. May 2016. I turn my phone on like I do every morning. and after my phone loads up, it says, "No service." I knew there had to be a mistake, so I called the phone company. I asked them why my phone had no service since I had just paid my bill. They looked on their system and proceeded to tell me that in their notes, they received a phone call a few hours earlier that morning from a young lady. They assumed it was me, I guess. And she said that she had a new phone and that the number needed to be transferred to this new phone. When they told her that the name didn't match on the account, somehow, I have no idea how, but she got them to change the name on my account from my name to hers. I have no idea what she wanted to accomplish by doing this, and even worse, how in the hell she got my number. I explained that this person was a long-time stalker, that I had reports to the police, and that I have to be protected against her because she is capable of anything. So they asked me to go into their corporate office so they could change everything back to its original state, as well as putting some security measures on the account so that this wouldn't happen again. Now, since then, so far, I haven't had any more incidents. I'm absolutely on high alert because if she was willing to wait 16 years and still wants to find me, for whatever reason, there is no way in hell that I'm going to let my guard down. The only reason I didn't file a restraining order is because as far as I know, she does not know where I live, and I want to keep it that way. However, if she thinks that I won't ever file one, if she does find me, she's got another thing coming. So, Sarah, let's not ever meet again.